I would like to ask you what you mean exactly by living with the question. The question is the answer. Before the question was formulated, the answer was already there. The answer was there before you were conceived. Wait, so when you say live with the question, you're talking about the ultimate question, not just any question. Yes, the ultimate question to which all questions in the end refer. You come to the ultimate question when you have explored all the relative questions. By relative questions, I mean those questions which do not fully express what you are really looking for. Any question which has a residue of book knowledge is relative. Any question which comes from memory, from past conditioning, is relative. Any question founded on emotional desire is relative. So question your questions and you will see their limits. This seeing brings you nearer to the nearest, which is the ultimate question. You said that when you first met your teacher, Atmananda, you asked him many questions, and he gave you gracious and suitable answers. But when he left and you did not see him for several weeks, there was a growing feeling that you had not asked the question, that you had not formulated the real question. You said that you felt at the time that if you could ask more profoundly, you would receive more profoundly. Was this the moment when you saw the limits of your mind? When you saw the difference between relative and absolute questions? Exactly. Every human being lives with questions, but these are not often formulated. People live in a blind fog of becoming, unaware of their motives for thinking and acting. They follow money making and don't even know what to do with the money when they have it. So the first step is to become aware of one's motives, to formulate the questions to ask. Why am I doing this? What am I looking for? Where am I going? In asking these relative questions, it will become clear that all your striving is for the survival of the I concept. You discover there is a person involved, and the ultimate question begins when you question the entity who is asking the questions. You become liberated from relative questions only when you one day ask yourself, what is this person, this I called myself? So one begins by questioning, then one questions the questions, and finally one is brought to question the questioner. But this questioner is still an object, so all of this belongs to the realm of relative questioning. How can one come to the ultimate question? You must profoundly explore the questioner. Ask what is his nature. Then you will see that it has no existence in itself. It is an image built up by education and hearsay, beliefs, experiences, and society. So, as long as there is any residue at all of a belief in an I cannot ask the ultimate question. When the person is eliminated, the self asks the self. The ultimate question is an inner state which comes from the answer itself. This inner state is beyond formulation, but you must go through formulation to become absolutely clear about this inner state. If it is a state beyond formulation, in which way can you still call it a question? It seems that you are not using the word question in a new way. Or should say, it seems that you are now using the word question in a new way. Is it the same as contemplation? All questions proceed from an I don't know. Otherwise, you would not ask a question. All questions come from the possibility of knowing. Otherwise, you would not ask a question. In other words, a question has its seed in the knowing, in the answer. This is also true on the most profound level. All questions arise in the answer. So you're saying that the inner state without formulation, which arises when the I is seen for what it is, does this inner state still have the basic nature of a question? It proceeds from I don't know and has its seed in the answer? Yes, but the difference is that in relative questioning, there is still an I who projects something to be known. The I don't know is temporary, whereas in the absence of the I, there is no projection of a known, and there is a spontaneous dwelling in the not knowing. In the absence of a questioner, the question becomes questioning, questioning without a questioner. If there is no personal entity to project or know anything, then the answer cannot be made an object of knowledge, and one is left with it as experience. Is this what you mean by the question is the answer? Yes, absolutely. The question is the openness present when there is no one present. The answer is nothing other than this openness. Openness is your real nature. It is all you are. The openness, the answer, refers to itself. There is nothing eventually knowable. There is a complete absence of visualization, representation, wishful thinking. There is no impulse to try to understand, to frame the answer with thought. It is ultimately negative in that it cannot be experienced as an object. Openness refers to our totality. Can we return to living with the question? And by this, do you mean then living in openness and not knowing? And how can we come to this living in openness? By living in non-concluding from moment to moment. See how your mind races backwards and forwards like a worried dog. See how you don't live in not knowing. How afraid you are to live in non-concluding. Living in non-concluding in openness is, as you said, contemplation without a contemplator. This inner state is the answer and the question. Well, it always seems that if I give up concluding, my life will fall apart, or worse, come to a complete standstill. Living in non-concluding does not mean being passive. Let us be clear about this. Non-concluding means you don't conclude through personal interference. Things, situations conclude by themselves when you leave them alone. Is there a choice for the girl on the tightrope? You can be sure she does not think of left or right, but is established unthinkingly in the center. She is spontaneously a non-conclusion. When you are established in globality, it is normal to live in choiceless awareness like the ballerina in the circus. So you see that action and non-action both belong to the mind. In our fullness, our globality, which is only present, the absence of all counterparts, there is spontaneous, pure action. And as there is no one choosing to act in this or that way, the action is spontaneously correct? Yes, the facts bring the conclusion, which may not always be according to ego's preference, but it is always right, an appropriate solution. When you are beyond choosing, like the dancer on the rope, when the mind does not plot, the conclusion comes instantaneously when the facts are ripe. Live open to all perceived, open to the openness. When you say live open to all perceived and do not interfere with comparison and judgment, it reminds me of the beautiful text, the Sin Sin Ming, which begins with, "The great way knows no difficulties, since it is beyond all choosing." What struck me about this translation over others I have read is that it is the way which is emphasized, which is beyond choosing, not that one must not choose. Very often I think people interpret your teaching as being about a state without flavor, without difference, where every object is alike in some way to every other. In fact, it is not that there are no differences, but that we are beyond differences. You are the sun which creates all objects. In openness there is difference, but not distinction. Difference, but not preference. Living without preference is not a correct vision. It is still putting emphasis on the object. The emphasis should be on the subject. It is not that all objects are the same, but that there is no longer an object. When you live in openness, the emphasis falls in the right place. Each object has then its own significance, its real meaning. In non-conclusion, the world is rich and intelligent. One must come to the state where there is a complete shift in energy from living in the known to living in the unknown. This is not the result of attitude, but the natural reorchestration of energy, which comes as the result of understanding, specifically the understanding that only in your absence is there ultimate presence. So all of one's sadhana, all of one's spiritual aspiration must be in the direction of this understanding, which results in the shift of energy? Absolutely. Does this understanding, this sudden insight, first take place on the level of the brain? Yes, but not in the mind which functions in complementary duality. What you are fundamentally is beyond the brain. but the brain makes it perceptible. The moment of insight is taken by the brain and transferred to our totality. And then it expands. It is felt immediately on every other level of the psychosomatic structure. Only when it has become global, affecting every cell, can one say it has become understanding. One is aware of a physiological change immediately. The insight resonates on every level. But to come to its full actualization, to penetrate the core of every cell, takes time. Can the body be prepared for this impregnation so that it is receptive more quickly? Yes, because it is, in a certain way, waiting for its perfect state, its perfect health. You've said that living with the question is exactly the same as living in openness, in not knowing. And you also said that this capacity, the willingness to live in not knowing, to welcome it, is the result of having had a glimpse of truth, of reality, without someone to experience it. What meaning then can live with the question have for all those who do not have this understanding and the spontaneous shift it brings from living in the known to living in the unknown? It seems that you are speaking to a very few mature souls, but how can those less blessed hear you and benefit? I have given the real meaning of living with the question, but living in the not knowing on many levels will bring you to a question. Inherent in the human being is, I want to know. That has nothing to do with maturity. It is an innate urge. I would say that one should begin by taking note how the moment you wake up in the morning, you anticipate. The whole day is spent in anticipation, in striving, in end gaining. See how you live in taking, in grasping, in constant knowing. So I would say begin by spending half a day in seeing all the moments when you are not living in not knowing. And then what happens? How can this help? When you see that you are always doing, you will find moments of discontinuity in you because it is you, as say John Smith, who is forcing the continuity. In these spaces, these moments of discontinuity, you feel yourself in non-objective presence. It is not an experience because there is nobody there to experience it, but it is a moment when there is a feeling of eternity. So you're saying these moments open my eyes to knowing myself without relating to anything? Yes. For a moment you are taken by an open window, a window on eternity. Once you have had a glimpse of your objectless self, you will be solicited more often by it. And one day you will find yourself living in the not knowing. Is this a sudden switchover? Yes, at a certain point you are pushed. Or pulled? Pulled, yes. And these moments of absence, of objectless presence, leave an echo. This echo is the shadow which brings you to its source. Well, you would not, of course, regard this half morning of taking note of all the anticipation as a practice. It is a practice without an entity practicing. So how can it be called a practice? Many of you want something to do, and when I give you practical advice, you don't heed it. You have given dire warnings about the results of a progressive approach, so we don't want to fall into the trap. When one hears the truth from the lips of the teacher, there can be no progression because it is a seed that is transmitted directly. Can one be on a progressive path and have found the Guru? No, because the starting point is false. On the progressive path, you are living in becoming, believing there is something to attain. But at the moment of transmission, you find yourself in the now, free from the future, free from intention.